Annie, yeah.
That's the. Something. Yeah.
(4 o'clock), so we'll call the meeting to order. First item, 1.1 is the Pledge of Allegiance. I will read it from the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board Member Wayne. Here. Board Member Walcott.
Here.
Board Member Tiffany. Here. Board Member Martin.
Here.
Board Member Gomez. Board Member Fonseca.
Present.
Board Member Dement.
Here.
Board Member Cazares. Present. Board Member Blackman. Here. Vice Chair Castanos. Here. And Chair Johnson.
Here.
I got 9.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's biggest news. Item number 2, additions and or deletions to the agenda. I don't know if anybody has any.
There are none. On staff.
All right. Item 3, public comments. I don't know if we have any.
We have no public comment at this moment.
Okay, item 4 is our conflict disclosures. Everybody here looks really conflicted. So that'll be okay. And number 5 is our current business, and 5.1 is the approval of the minutes for the Community Police Oversight Board regular meeting held Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. And before we go to that, I would like to say that we missed our June meeting. It was my fault. We missed our June meeting. I'll take the blame. If I had done a little better coordinating, so it won't happen again. We won't miss any meetings. So just apologize for that. But to look at our minutes, has everybody a chance to review the minutes for from the May meeting? And any corrections, comments, or anything anybody saw that they'd like? I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All right. So we've got a motion and seconded to approve those minutes. Okay, there.
Board Member Wayne, how do you vote?
Same.
Board Member Walkup, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Tiffany, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Martin, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Board Member Fonseca, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Dement, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Casares, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Blackman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vice Chair Castanos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with board members Wayne and Martin abstaining and everyone else voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Our next item 5.2 is introduction of new community police oversight board members, 2 wonderful, fantastic new members. So whoever would like to introduce themselves first, and just say a little bit about yourself, just like in grade school.
I'm Susan Wayne. I've lived in La Mesa all my life near MacArthur Park, so I won't tell you how long that has been. I went to St. Martin's Helix High School. My children went to Helix High School. 2 of my grandsons went to Helix High School. I have 2 little granddaughters that are, one's in school, one's not yet. So that's why I want to keep La Mesa a safe place really for our future generation. My background is in laboratory medicine, and I went to San Diego State for business management. I was on the task force, and I'm happy to be back.
Yay.
My name is Luke Martin. I'm an attorney. I have been for 12 years now, so that's kind of crazy. Thinking about that out loud. I currently serve as a staff attorney for the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I've been there for the last 5 years, and so we represent 35,000 different therapists and social workers and psychologists all throughout California. Passionate about this topic. I was involved in the riots inadvertently when they were here in San Diego, so I'm excited to contribute and hopefully make San Diego a safer place. Excuse me, La Mesa a safer place, and as well as San Diego, that's good too. I've actually lived here for the last 13 years.
And you formerly served on the parking commission.
I did, yes. Well,
Great, thank you both. Great to have both of you. Item 5.3 is La Mesa Police Department updates. Chief.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see everybody today. I want to start off, obviously, we've been working on hiring, and I told you over the last couple meetings that we were working on hiring a lieutenant. We had somebody in the background process. We ran a very thorough process that we went out of La Mesa for. So we went throughout the entire county. Matter of fact, we opened it up throughout California. We got several applicants, and bottom line is we ended up with one, and he is here in this room. I want to introduce everybody to Lieutenant Matt Conlon. Matt Conlon comes to us, started out in El Cajon Police Department. He was there for 22 years. He finished off as a sergeant there and then went to San Diego State University as a lieutenant, ultimately as a captain, and then went over to Coronado PD, where we were fortunate to pick him up and bring him over here as a lieutenant for this agency. So I just want to give him a few minutes to say hello and introduce himself.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, so I'm excited to start over here. As he said, I've got quite a bit of experience. I've worked in a number of different divisions throughout my time in law enforcement. So I bring a lot of experience. Hopefully I can share that with La Mesa PD, and really excited to be working with this group as well.
welcome.
So June was very busy. So I'm just gonna kind of go through the things that we've done, because I think it's important for you to hear all of the community activities that we've been part of throughout the month of June into July and continuing obviously through the month of July, starting tomorrow. But we started out with our Flag Day on June 3rd. I was at a graduation at Southwestern Police Academy, graduating a police officer at that same time. So both very busy. The next week, we started our youth leadership camp that started on June 12th. That was very exciting. I think we had 15 kids in that academy. And you've probably seen some of the pictures on our social media, but they just had an absolute blast. It's a great opportunity for building relationships and having the kids come in and learn some leadership techniques and get to know us also. So we were really excited for that. We had our MAD Officer of the Year luncheon. He's right. And that was on June 9th. We had Officer Neumeister, who was recognized as the Rookie of the Year for the Mothers Against Drunk Driving Award. And then we also had Officer Ollendorf, who was recognized as an Officer of the Year for the La Mesa Police Department. Really excited to have both of those two be recognized for those events. And on June 18th, we were out celebrating Juneteenth with the rest of the community at MacArthur Park. That was a great event. We had a blast just like normal. It wasn't real hot, but it was a good time to be out there and celebrating with the community. We attended the Regional Task Force on Homeless meeting on June 28th. That was here locally in La Mesa. On June 23rd, we had the San Diego Police Officer Association Officer of the Year banquet. They do that every year. It's a real big event. We were able to recognize Sergeant Julie Jensen for that honor. So another great event that we were able to recognize our officers with. And then following that, we had the Scottish Rite Officer of the Year dinner, and Officer Jake Howdy was recognized as our San Diego Scottish Rite Officer of the Year for a lot of his outstanding work. Just this last weekend on July 15th, we were out marching in the San Diego Pride Parade. Very warm, but nice. It was a wonderful crowd. Again, we just have a blast going out there and doing that every year. So very fortunate to be part of that. And then last but not least, tomorrow we'll be over at the Croc Center. They have a summer camp every year for kids. So I'm bringing some of our officers. Declan's gonna be there to meet the kids and just want to show the officers that we're right next door. And we have plenty of opportunities. It's an opportunity for us to go there and show them that, you know, there's officers that look like them that are here. And you get them excited for a career in law enforcement. They do a bunch of different events with crime scenes and different things. So it's really fun to just to see the smiles on the kids' face. As far as our staffing right now, I do have some good and bad news, right? I told you about, I went to Southwestern College and graduated that police officer from the Southwestern Police Academy on Flag Day. And missed Flag Day because of it, but that officer has decided that law enforcement is not for him. After going through a year-long academy for himself, you know, hats off to people that get into this profession and recognize that it's not for everybody. It for sure isn't. It's unfortunate for us because that puts us back at 5 police officers down. So we're still working very hard. We have a lateral police officer. I think I mentioned that briefly. That's in backgrounds right now. I don't want to jinx it, but that officer, if they come to us, they're from a Northern California agency. They're very well connected in their community up there. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit for us. And hopefully everything works out. We're almost to the point of hire. That will be our first lateral incentive bonus hire. So I mentioned previously, and for those that are new, we did a $10,000 and $15,000 bonus trying to get lateral officers into this agency. We have not been successful with it. That's just the honest truth. So hopefully this is the first one we get. What we did is we kind of reallocated that money for dispatcher retention because of the low pay rates for dispatchers here and across the county. Just trying to keep them there. And probably this year, in the next year to 2 years, we're going to probably we're going to reinvent that and see how we can recruit a little bit better by having some bonuses for officers. Bring us people that you know, tell them how great this place is. I think, you know, we're just looking at different ways to recruit. It's still this way across the county. It's across the state of California, probably across the nation. We're recruiting from the same pool of officers and employees, and that makes it difficult. So I try not to steal from other agencies if I don't have to, and hopefully they won't steal from us. But we're still doing that. We're 1 dispatcher down. So we have another round of interviews coming up. I believe it's next week. We're also hiring 3 part-time community service officers. Those are our civilian employees that come here and do the work, such as following up on crime scenes. They're out patrolling, they're doing crime scene investigation, they help out with our traffic collisions. They're a huge help. And then, of course, our RSVPs, our retired senior volunteers. We just brought on 2 more to the team. So they've been out helping us out quite a bit. I mentioned previously that we have our staffing study going on. They just had an on-site visit in June where they came down here. They spoke to a majority of the officers, the staff, about, you know, what is it that we're doing? What do we have extra? And the reason I say that is we're smaller agencies. So in smaller agencies, you wear a lot of hats. I personally don't wear any, but if you were to look at all of the hats, the invisible hats that our staff wears, you would understand that, you know, there's a lot of different things. We want to see, are we doing this the best way? Is it the best practice? Could it be done better? And if so, how does that look? So that's what's happening. There's going to be 2 community listening sessions by the staffing company. It's Citygate LLC. So we're working on those dates. As soon as we get those, we'll make sure that they get out on our website, the city's website, and to you for public comment. Oceanside did a study with the same company. They had the same thing. They had 2 community listening sessions, and it's quite a process. It's about 6 months minimal to get the process done, because what they're looking at is they're pulling all of our computer-aided dispatch calls for service. They're looking at our response times. And really, they're just taking a microscope to everything that we do here in La Mesa to see, number one, how is it working? And if there's things that we can improve on, what that looks like. So really excited to get that study completed. We expect that it'll be presented to the city council in December. That's probably a high expectation with holidays and everything that comes up. But we're gonna continue to push that. I wanted to mention that ride-alongs, especially for the new members of the board, are still available. If you would like to do a ride-along with our agency, I highly encourage it. I think you're gonna get a lot of information from our officers. Sergeant Todd Snyder is the contact for that. So it's S Snyder, SNYDER at cityoflamesa.us. You can just shoot him an email. We'll make sure that gets in the minutes and out to you. But please come on in and schedule a ride along if you get a chance. And then last but not least, I want to talk about a project that we just started and are getting ready to launch. And, you know, we talk about LGBTQ plus and challenges of transgender youth, trust of law enforcement, things of that nature. So our liaison came up with the "You Are Safe with Me" pen. So I think I brought enough for everybody. But I wanted to show you what these are. And basically it is the transgender flag colors. "You are safe with me." It would be worn on the officer's uniform as they go through their training with us. They can wear this pen. It's going to be an optional pen that we'll add to our collection. And really just to get the word out there that it's okay. Come talk to a police officer. So pass these down. Forward. Thank you. More for you guys.
Steve, I had a question for you about the community service officers. You talked about
The communities.
yeah, 3 part-time ones,
Yes.
community service officers. But what's our full complement of this here? So how many are?
Right now we have 4.
4 full-timers?
So we have four full-time community service officers. 3 of those work in patrol.
Yeah.
So they're out there helping patrol and traffic. And then 1 works in investigations. The other thing I forgot to mention, we just got 2 student interns from San Diego State University. And they're going to be up in investigations helping out. So another look into what our department looks like and working closely with San Diego State. So 4 community service officers that are full-time here, and then the 3 part-time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So are the student interns, is that a paid internship?
Is not a paid internship,
Like,
although we can turn it into a paid internship depending on how well they do.
oh, that's good to know.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I have a question. You mentioned the incentive is between $10,000 and $15,000. How does that compare to the rest of San Diego?
It's across the board. We're probably one of the lower incentives. But we started out right where everybody else was. I think Chula Vista went for 20,000, a little bit, maybe a couple weeks after we came out with ours.
Yes.
But you know, it's still a good incentive. If you have a basic post certificate, the Peace Officer Standards and Training. In other words, you've gone through a training program, you've graduated, you've gotten the certificate, you can come here and we'll give you $10,000 and we'll give it to you within 2 years. So other agencies are spreading it out between 5 and 6 years.
And they need to be
That's
there for
retention.
2 years, right?
I'm sorry.
If they leave before that, they obviously don't get paid that.
Well, I mean, we probably wouldn't get the money back. There's been lawsuits on that. I think Los Angeles Police Department did something like that and lost their lawsuit, but you know, the whole intent is just to get them in the door.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, you know, once they get here and the officers that we've hired, they get here and they're just like, wow. And, you know, I speak for Lieutenant Conlon, who just came here to our agency and the reception that he's received, and I hear it all the time. I feel like a member of the family here. I really feel like I'm cared for. And I told you when I had conversations with all my officers and employees, I said 3 things. Do you feel valued? Do you feel respected? And do you feel safe? And if the answer to the first 2 questions is yes, I want to know about the safe, because it's not about giving you the bulletproof vests and all the gear that you need. We're going to do that regardless, but safe is here. Because our officers, our employees go through a lot. They deal with a lot, and I want them to feel that they can reach out when they need help. And we have a wonderful wellness program that I've talked to you about, and for the newer members, I'm happy to explain that. But we have a department psychologist that We're one of a kind. Agencies typically don't have that. But we have a department psychologist that any of our officers can reach out to anytime. No questions asked. We want them to get help, yes.
I wanted to commend you and your department for these You Are Safe with Me pins as a member of the LGBTQ community. I know especially our transgender youth can have a lot of reservations about that. So I'm wanted to commend you for that. But also wondering how you're gonna get the word out in the community about these, because you have to get, kind of close to them, their pin, and see what they mean. So is there gonna be like a social media or like something? I think it might be good if you like send something home with students for their parents to see. So I'm wondering about that. And then one last thing before you answer. Thank you for walking in the Pride Parade. San Diego PD for the first year had their rainbow patch and they were very proud about that and really hyping it up. And every time they said anything, I said, I'm so glad you're doing this. La Mesa did it first. So thank you.
And ours look better.
Ours were way better. I agree.
But the answer to your question is yes, social media, Katie Lynch, Lieutenant Katie Lynch, she's gonna push that across any avenues. We have Gracia here now, so we're gonna get the word out, whether it's in schools, whether it's at the LGBTQ center, just so that everybody knows. If they're in La Mesa and they see that, even if they don't, they know that you can come up and talk to us.
I'm more than happy to liaise between y'all and the LGBTQ center if needed.
Thank you. Appreciate
And
that.
San Diego Pride as well.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I think you mentioned that there's going to be 2 community listening sessions and that was already done by Oceanside, if I heard you. What were some of the results of that? I mean, is that something that Oceanside would be willing to share with La Mesa to kind of compare between the two, as well as to kind of see if there's anything that we can glean before? So that way, if there was any issues with that, it could actually be more successful here.
Yeah, actually, we've talked to not only Oceanside, but Citygate in general to see how it was set up, what worked best, what maybe they can improve on. We don't have the answers to those questions yet. But those are gonna be some of the things that we'll look at. I mean, obviously, we don't get a large turnout at some of these things sometimes, so we need to look at how we can best do that. So, yeah,
Makes sense.
more to come.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
So Chief, following up on Luke's question about the listening sessions. Citygate's gonna run them, so it's gonna be a little different than what you've done in the past. And if so, would they mind if we did our community attitudinal survey like we've done in past years? Or would that be an intrusion in what they're doing?
I'll check with them.
I mean, we could do it before,
I think we can figure out exactly when the best time to fit that in. It may be okay.
okay,
It's just community coming together, but we
Yeah.
really want them to focus on, well, and that's probably a good fit. So I'll tell you what, I'll talk to them on the 31st, I think it is. So we'll find out exactly.
okay. And if it's not working, we'll figure something out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
No further questions. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Item 5.4 is the independent police auditor update.
Yeah, so I apologize for texting during the meeting. I've been going back and forth with Rick. He's having some technical difficulties right now, so we may not see him, but we should be able to hear him.
Oh.
Rick, are you there?
Yeah, just got unmuted.
Good.
So
All right.
the auditor's office has been busy. We submitted the quarterly report to Lynn yesterday. We've completed yet another audit. We have 2 more pending with the goal to try to get them out every 3 weeks. The last one we completed and have submitted also to Lynn is 2302. And we're working, I believe, on 2311 right now. Could be 2211. They all blend together after today, but yeah, that's where we're at. I haven't noted any issues. Like I said, the quarterly report's good to go. And I will be out there on Monday, the 31st, to sit and meet with as many board members as want to meet and not in violation of the Brown Act.
So I will be reaching out for us to conduct those meetings. I'd like for us to review the quarterly report as we've been doing offline, that process. So you'll hear from me soon on scheduling that when Rick's here in person.
Any questions?
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, I'll continue to listen and I'll be muted.
Okay, our next item 5.5, police officers Bill of Rights and Brown Act presentation by legal counsel.
Hello, I'm Caroline Chiapetti from Strumwasser and Reacher. For those of you whom I haven't met before, how is my audio? I was having a little difficulty with my mic earlier. Can you hear me?
Pretty good.
Okay, let me share my screen.
So before Carolyn starts, why don't I just introduce this? This is the Police Officers Bill of Rights and the Brown Act presentation that new members get. We've had, I think, 4 new members since our last presentation, so we felt like it was a good time to do a refresher. So that is why you're reviewing this presentation today.
Yes. It seems like I don't have screen sharing permission. I'm not sure if that's something that one of you has the capability to fix.
Can you click on her as a participant and make her a co-host? There you go.
Yeah, these look like my slides from last year. They're a little bit different today.
And then go ahead and minimize your PowerPoint. She can do her own.
Oh.
You should have ability now, Caroline.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I think you need to click stop. Oh, it worked.
All right, there we go. Thank you, Lynn, for that introduction. And I've been asked to keep this brief, so I'm going to try to keep things moving along. But if you have questions, feel free to stop me, and I'll be sure to provide these slides to staff afterwards so they can circulate these to all of you and you can have them as a reference. I know some of you have seen a version of this presentation before. One reason that we do this regularly is that the law is constantly evolving in this area, especially with growing attention towards accountability of law enforcement. And so there have been lots of amendments in recent years to existing law about what kinds of police records are public and what are confidential. And I think we can expect to see more developments in the coming years coming out of the legislature. So that's one reason why you get to have the experience of this presentation every year or so. My goals in the next few minutes are to help explain how the CPOB's role involves the handling of confidential information. I want you all to understand the legal restrictions on handling confidential information and understand the procedures for handling confidential information. I'm just briefly flashing the section of the La Mesa Municipal Code Ordinance on the screen that identifies your powers and duties. We're not going to go through all of them right now, but I encourage you all to read the full ordinance when you get a chance. You can find it online as part of the La Mesa Municipal Code, especially new members. This is a helpful set of guidelines for what you're doing here and what you're authorized to do. And then there's also separately a policies and procedures document that's on the CPOB website that puts a bit more meat on the bones of these powers and duties. So we're here to talk about some of the legal constraints on handling confidential materials. And I'd like to just identify the types of confidential materials that you might be dealing with or not dealing with, as it may be. And that would be confidential information and complaints. Any information identifying officers is confidential, and confidential information in audit reports. Information identifying officers is confidential, and any specific information relating to investigations and discipline is confidential. So we'll get more into why those things are confidential, but that is the framework that helps guide some of these policies and procedures that you all are, that the veteran members are accustomed to, for how you see the audit reports, how you discuss them in public meetings, and why you don't necessarily have access to complaints in the first instance and that sort of thing. So there's 3 primary legal constraints on the handling of confidential information. One is the California Public Safety Officers Procedural Bill of Rights, which you'll hear me refer to as POBRA or POBOR. Penal Code, which is a section of the California Statutory Code. Section 832.7 sets very specific limitations on what is confidential and what is not. And La Mesa Police Department has its own policies. So I'm briefly flashing up some of the key provisions of POBRA or POBOR. This is a set of rights that police officers possess under state law during disciplinary investigations. So it's like their own Bill of Rights. It's a catalog of the minimum rights that the state legislature has deemed necessary to secure stable employer-employee relations. I'm glossing over those fairly quickly because most of POBRA doesn't really apply, doesn't need to concern you, since you are not yourselves conducting any investigations, neither is the IPA. In La Mesa's oversight model, investigations are all handled by LMPD, and LMPD is well versed in those rights under POBRA. And so they're not really affecting your role as an oversight body. One thing to note about La Mesa's oversight format is that the IPA has access to investigation materials and may interview witnesses. So there's nothing in POBRA that prevents the IPA from serving as the eyes and ears of the CPOB and reporting back to you non-confidential information. So now we are getting to sections 832.7 and the surrounding statutes. This is really at the heart of California law's constraints on the publication of information in police personnel files and police disciplinary records, that sort of thing. So I want to slow down here for a second. These statutes are commonly referred to as the Pitchess statutes. I don't think you'll hear that term very often, maybe from Rick or someone else in his office. That phrase comes out of some court cases in the 70s, which imposed limitations on the discovery and dissemination of certain police records, including personnel records and records of citizens' complaints about individual officers and any reports or findings related to the investigation of complaints. So those court cases in the 70s said those types of records are confidential and can only be obtained in court via the discovery process, which is not something you all have to worry about. So what is a personnel record? You'll see any file maintained under an individual officer's name, maintained by LMPD, containing records relating to the following. So any sort of disciplinary record, employee advancement record, complaints, investigations of complaints, personal data. So you may be asking, if those things are all confidential, what in the world are we doing here? What is the IPA able to see and do? So While these laws largely prevent the public disclosure of these records, state law doesn't prevent the police chief or LMPD from disclosing those records to the IPA in the context of an audit. So by reviewing those, by handing those records over to the IPA, they're not being made public. And there's also nothing that would hypothetically prevent the police chief from disclosing those records to the city manager, who also has some investigatory powers. So there are some ways in which state law involves this, permits the sharing of those materials as long as they're not disclosed to the public. So while there's no legal issue with the IPA having access to things like citizen complaints and other personnel records, because of the Brown Act, the CPA as a full body is constrained in what it can review and discuss in public. And so this is part of the reason why we have this hybrid model in La Mesa, where the IPA reviews documents that are confidential in the first instance and then puts together things like the quarterly reports and the audit reports, which contain information that is appropriate for public disclosure and discussion by the CPOB. And if you're new and some of that sounds confusing, the CPOB policies and procedures document that I referenced, which is available online, that will kind of make it clear what I'm talking about, what those guidelines are for how we've created workarounds so that reports can be shared with the CPOB and what can be publicly discussed. All right, so in recent years, there has been growing demand for accountability from law enforcement agencies, as I mentioned, and so we've seen a number of new bills come out of the legislature. A few years ago, the legislature enacted SB 1421, which amended the law to make several previously confidential kinds of personnel records publicly accessible as of January 1st, 2019. So previously, we had that broad prohibition on the public disclosure of any personnel records. Now, under 1421, certain records that are related to very serious kinds of incidents of police misconduct actually must be made available if requested via a California Public Records Act request. So those involve records relating to an officer-involved shooting, an incident in which the use of force by an officer resulted in death or great bodily injury, any record relating to an incident in which there was a sustained finding of sexual assault, and any record relating to an incident in which there was a sustained finding of dishonesty by a police officer. So 1421 identifies these four categories of serious misconduct. And in those instances, personnel records must be disclosed if requested by the public. Here I've just put the statutory definition for what kinds of records would have to be produced. You'll see that this is quite broad: all investigative reports, evidence, transcripts of interviews, copies of disciplinary records. And it's just worth flagging that when this statute went into effect, it placed like a rather significant burden on law enforcement agencies around the state. The law has been held to apply retroactively to police officers, so there were many organizations and individuals that filed PRA requests for all personnel records related to officer-involved shootings going way back. And so it's been onerous for departments to go through and produce all of these documents that they have. And you know, there are still delays. So just wanted to point out how what a shift this amendment was for agencies. All right, a year ago, we got another new law out of the legislature, Senate Bill 16, which enacted additional reforms to 8832.7 and the related PITCHA statutes. And this law went into effect January 1, 2022, and requires law enforcement agencies to release records in 4 more categories, which I'll get to on the next slide. This amendment also instituted a number of other reforms. It's worth noting that there are some provisions that allow police departments to delay the release of some of those records during an active investigation. So as I flagged on the previous slide, it may be that there's a serious incident of misconduct. That incident is being investigated, and someone from the public might file a Public Records Act request requesting all of the information related to that incident to date. And there are certain, in certain circumstances, the police department can delay the sharing of that information until the investigation is over. I'd also flag number 4, which now requires police departments to request an officer's file and review any investigations of misconduct before hiring an officer. And here I've put up the 4 new categories of documents that would have to be disclosed in response to a Public Records Act request. So now we also have records related to complaints alleging unreasonable or excessive force, an officer's failure to intervene, prejudice or discrimination, an unlawful search or arrest. And I'll just underscore that, note that all 4 of these categories refer to records of a sustained finding. So what that means is that the records in these contexts only have to be disclosed if an investigation into the allegation has been conducted and completed by law enforcement, and law enforcement has concluded that the officer did engage in that misconduct. So if the agency were to reach a different outcome and find that the allegation or the complaint against the officer was unfounded, those records would not have to be disclosed. So essentially, only if there's actually been a finding of misconduct do the records have to be disclosed in these 4 contexts. I've alluded to the California Public Records Act, which some of you may be more familiar with than others. Any member of the public can file a request with any public agency, including a law enforcement agency, asking for disclosable public records. Those records generally have to be produced no later than 45 days from the date of a CPRA request. But as I mentioned earlier, there are some exceptions in this police context where there are pending investigations. I'm also just briefly flashing up here that La Mesa has its own policies for the retention of citizen complaints, where those have to be kept, how long they're kept. And if you're curious, you can find those online on the LMPD website. Most of them are in Rule 5. But that is merely if you're curious. Oops. All right, so I've also been alluding to the Brown Act, which might be newer for our new members, though it sounds like those of you have some public meeting experience. And the Brown Act is California's state law, which requires all meetings of legislative bodies like yourselves, government bodies, to meet in public and to be making decisions in view of the public. One key takeaway from the Brown Act for this purpose, for the purpose of this presentation, is that if a majority of the board considers any document, that document must be made public. So this is the real reason why you as a body cannot view confidential materials like citizen complaints or an unredacted audit report or any kind of investigation materials in a personnel record. Because as soon as a majority of you viewed that document, it would become a public record and have to be made public. And so there's a tension between what the Brown Act requires and what those other statutes we just talked about requires. So this is essentially why anything that you see in a public meeting cannot contain confidential information. Otherwise, it would have to be disclosed to the public, and that would violate those other statutes. You may be familiar with the notion of a closed session. I don't think we've had any here with the CPOB, but there are very narrow exceptions for where a government body like yourselves can meet in private outside of the view of the public to discuss certain things. Litigation is one such example. Employment matters, these don't really apply to you all. Often these meetings are with counsel, and so those types of meetings can occur behind closed doors, but unfortunately, you can't get around the Brown Act requirements by holding a closed session in order to discuss any of this kind of confidential information. So what does this all mean in practical terms? As I've been harping on again and again, the CPOB's ability to directly review and consider confidential information. So really anything that would identify a particular officer as the subject of a complaint or a particular disciplinary action is limited. So this is why the IPA is the one who reviews complaints, and the IPA then prepares aggregated and appropriate information for the CPOB to review regarding those complaints, and that's what we see in the quarterly report. And then audits of investigations are conducted by the IPA, who prepares a public report of the audit that you all may review and discuss in public session. So this is why we rely on the IPA. The IPA is the CPOB's eyes and ears. As an individual and not a California legislative body, the IPA can see things that you all as a body cannot see without having to turn them over to the public. The IPA isn't subject to the Brown Act. So that's why we rely on the auditor to review confidential materials and then put together publicly available reports. The IPA, with the assistance of counsel, is responsible for filtering out confidential information and materials put before the entire CPOB. So before you all see the audit reports, Dale and I, along with Rick, go through the reports and try to determine what kind of detail here could potentially identify an officer. Obviously, we make sure their name is removed. In certain instances, we remove any gendered pronouns, anything that would make that officer readily available or readily identifiable. And then that allows you to discuss the ensuing report in a public meeting. What to do when in doubt? If you think that you have received confidential information, please feel free to reach out to me or Dale, to the IPA, to the city manager, to the chair of the board, and we will help determine whether that information is indeed confidential and what you can and can't do with it. So that is all that I have for you. I know I went through that really quickly. I hope the slides are helpful, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Caroline, John Fonseca, you mentioned with regard to the release of reports for, say, an officer with a complaint, but it said only to a particular incident. What about prior reports with regard to other disciplinary issues, I guess?
So are you talking about reports that have to be released under the new statutory amendments? Yeah, those provisions have been determined to apply retroactively. I think there was a court case I referenced in the last couple of years that said, yes, you could seek records related to like a 2017 incident that fell into those categories.
Thank you.
Question.
I don't know if this would go directly to you or maybe the chief. On the complaint form that's currently on the site, it states the Mesa PD will review every complaint. The Community Police Oversight Board will determine if an audit by the IPA is necessary. That leads me to believe that the community feels they're submitting the report to the CPOB and that we will review it, and that could contain confidential information.
No, go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah, so that is a tricky nuance. And so the way that we have been handling that in practice is that the PD and the IPA receive all of those complaints in the first instance. The IPA then prepares a summary for the board that is contained within the quarterly report. And Rick could maybe speak more to this, but that basically provides a brief summary of the incident, the date it took place, and if the incident, so there's a few categories of misconduct that the IPA automatically audits. And so if the complaint alludes to that kind of misconduct, the IPA is going to conduct an audit no matter what. If it doesn't rise to that level, the CPOB, after reading that summary of the complaint and the description of the incident that the IPA has put in the quarterly report, the CPOB can ask the IPA to conduct an audit or ask the IPA for more information. And so this is something that we have been trying to hammer out. How much information does the CPOB need in that quarterly report in order to exercise that discretionary function and determine whether to request an audit? So the CPOB isn't receiving those complaint forms directly and reading them all themselves, but they're being filtered out by the IPA, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. I'm just wondering if it would make sense to the public, the way it's stated here on the complaint form. Maybe the verbiage needs to be a little bit different. So that the public understand who sees their complaint first and then how it would get to the CPOBs.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that there's been lots of discussion in previous meetings about refining this complaint form. So if you all wanted to add that to your list of possible modifications, you would be able to do that.
Caroline, I was thinking that if somebody, say, a citizen wanted to give a completed complaint to Leroy as chair, he could take it and then give it to the chief or IPA to follow up with. But we wouldn't bring it to a meeting, of course, because that would be public. Is that still possible?
Yeah, I believe that is still possible. Leroy wouldn't have any obligation to turn that document over to the public under the Brown Act if he was the only member to have seen it. And there's nothing to prevent an individual from handing it to Leroy. So that's correct.
Okay. Maybe, yeah, that's kind of a way to address that issue. So I have a question about the, is COBRA something that every citizen has to abide by? Because you see on social media so much information released about a police officer and where they live and that sort of thing. Is that a violation of COBRA by people who you know?
Do you mean doxing? Oh.
Yeah, dox them. Yeah.
Yeah, so one reason that I didn't spend more time on POBRA is a set of rules governing the relationship between an employee and an employer. So in this context, between a police officer and the police department or the city. So they're really employment related rights. So an individual citizen, so the officer's rights are in the workplace, if that makes sense. They apply in the context of a disciplinary proceeding and prevent their employer from doing certain things, not a member of the public.
So I'm just curious, from the chief's perspective, do officers do a really good job of keeping their their personal information off the internet.
They do a lot better now.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's true, because the issues with investigations and we call POBAR, POBRA, but is that a citizen can put whatever they want on social media,
Oh,
and it could not have all the facts.
Yeah.
Yet, we would not be able to speak about it because there's a current ongoing investigation. And when that happens, and we've seen it plenty of times across this nation, people think we're hiding things. And the reality is we're not, we're just not trying to violate that law. And that the investigation will slowly work itself out, so it just takes time. So the education piece on that, but the answer to your question, yeah, there's pay for sites that officers can go to where they can have their information wiped from the internet, so that people aren't doxing and going to their house and protesting in front of their house and their families. But it can still happen.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's an important reminder that your obligations, as outlined in this slideshow, are as members of an official body that is part of the city of La Mesa. And so while someone who experiences misconduct personally might want to post on Facebook the name of that officer and describe what happened to them, that individual is not subject to the Brown Act, but you all as an official body of the city of La Mesa are subject to the Brown Act. And that's why there's more constraints on your ability to identify officers, discuss the specifics of incidences.
So Carolyn, I was wondering, just to take that further, if we engage in discussions on Nextdoor or, any of the websites that have, misinformation, we have to be really careful about not disclosing anything. We should probably even stay away from trying to correct misinformation. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so social media is really tricky for members of Brown Act bodies, and that could probably be the topic of another presentation. I don't want to do too much off the cuff lawyering, but yeah, that's really tricky, especially if, say, that a majority of the people in this room, a majority of the members of the CPOB are on Nextdoor, and now a couple of you have participated in a discussion on Nextdoor, that could rise to the level of a meeting under the Brown Act, a meeting in violation of the Brown Act. And so I would really caution you about actively participating in discussions on matters that are within your jurisdiction as a body. You can all be in a dog rescue of La Mesa Facebook group discussing what puppies you want to adopt, but anything related to your purview, I would caution you to be careful.
Is the Brown Act, with regards to information we learn about in our professional capacity as board members? Or is it just in any information? Because that's where I'm a little bit confused, because I can understand if we gain the information here and then disseminate it to third parties, but if we're in our private life, gain that information, being able to share it doesn't seem like it should subject us to the Brown Act in that capacity.
Yeah, so this is something that is tricky in this moment in history, where the practical reality is that you might have independent knowledge of the name or identity of an officer who was involved in an incident, either because it's all over social media or it's been reported in the press. But the city, which extends to you all, nevertheless have an obligation to not violate those confidentiality provisions set forth in 832.7. And so when you're acting in your official capacity as a member of the CPOB and a representative of the city, you can't disclose any identifying information, even if that information exists out there in the ether. And I understand that that is sort of a strange fiction to be having to balance, but that's the state of the law right now, and we may see that changing in years to come. It's the reality that information is out there on the internet and readily available, and the legislature might come up with some more practical solution. But for now, your job, which I understand can be a little bit difficult, is to maintain a sort of fiction between what is out there in the universe and what are you allowed to discuss as a representative of the city in a public meeting. I'm sorry to not have a better answer than that, but this is an issue that's a bit murky. And I know even with some of the specific historical events that we've had audits of, I know that the names of these officers are out there in the public, and yet we have tried hard to maintain their anonymity in the context of our discussions in this room and in these reports in order to ensure the city's compliance with the law.
Good.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate that presentation.
You're welcome.
Next item, 5.6. Consideration of a mediation policy for the La Mesa Police Department. Yeah. Just a little bit of history about this one. It's taken a while to get to where we are, so happy. You should be celebrating. Okay, so it's taken a long time. After working together for over a year, the ad hoc subcommittee, consisting of Danny Walker, team, and self, we've had input from the IPA mediator, Bruce Ambrose, our legal team, including Caroline and Dale, the LMPD Police Officers Association. So we've had a lot of folks at this. And it's probably going to take you a while to go through it. I don't think everybody's seen it yet. But I would like I guess at this point, and Lynn, help me out, we're just considering and they haven't seen it yet. So people are going to need to look at it.
It was attached
Yeah.
to the agenda, so folks should have had opportunity to take a look at it. The copy you see on the screen here, it was provided by Caroline. This is the marked up copy that may be more helpful for her to briefly go through. The most recent edits that were made and agreed upon by the POA and the ad hoc subcommittee that led us to an agreement of the policy. I don't know that we need to go through it all, but hitting those highlights would be good.
Sure, I'm happy to go through those unless a member of the subcommittee would like to.
Would you like Caroline to go through it or?
I've got a few items
All right,
to look at.
Sure.
The one big sticking point for us was coming up with what was being considered a successful mediation, and I think we kind of handled that in this document in terms of the agreement with the POA and with the ad hoc subcommittee about what that would entail. So that was one of our big sticking points. There's a lot in this document, right? There are a lot of things that, like I said, we've worked, the subcommittee, we've worked on it over a year, and we've got documents we haven't seen yet because we haven't created them yet. So we're starting down a road to that mediation system that we can have in operation here in La Mesa, but we're still a little bit away from it because we need documents for people to sign. We don't have yet, right? That kind of thing. But I think it's in really good shape. I don't know, Caroline, do you have anything particular you wanted to look at that you wanted to?
Yeah, just In response to your comment about the figuring out what constitutes a successful mediation, I think if we scroll down to 1022.6A, that is the provision that captures our agreement. One of the concerns was whether if mediation fails, what happens? Does that complainant have an opportunity to have their complaint investigated by the police department, or have they waived their right to having their complaint investigated by walking into mediation? And so we did a lot of research into other cities and counties mediation programs to figure out what does a successful mediation looks like. And we found that the most common definition in this context doesn't require an actual formal agreement to be reached between the mediating parties. Mediation in this context is a little different from mediation in civil litigation, where you would agree to, one party would agree to pay a sum of money to the other. That's not really what we're looking at. So we defined a successful mediation as one where the mediator determines that both parties have participated in good faith and both parties feel like they've been heard and understand the other party's point of view, even if they do not agree. So if the mediation is successful, the complainant officially withdraws their complaint, and at that point doesn't have the option of proceeding to an investigation and an audit. So that was one of the key compromises that we worked out. The flip side of that is in 1022.6G, if you scroll down. And this provision outlines what happens if the mediation is not successful. So if the mediation is unsuccessful, or the mediator determines that the police officer is not participating in good faith, at that point, the mediator can stop the mediation, and at that point, the complaint will be processed for investigation by the police department. On the other hand, if it's the complainant who's not participating in good faith, the complaint will be withdrawn. So you'll see that there are some compromises here built in, but the goal is to ensure that both parties have an incentive to meaningfully participate in good faith in the mediation. And this language, I think both the subcommittee and the POA believe that this language gave each party equal incentive to participate meaningfully.
So
I think those were the big changes.
Yeah, I really commend the subcommittee and you, Caroline, for your work on this, because this addresses exactly what we were concerned about. And before, for those of you who don't know, the language said that if mediation is unsuccessful, then the complaint would be dropped. And our concern was, well, what if the officer comes in and really doesn't participate in mediation, and then the complaint is dropped? So this addresses that. If the mediator determines that it's not that officer is not participating in good faith, then the complaint shall be processed as if it were never referred to mediation. So it's a big change. I think it definitely addresses the concerns that we brought forward a few months ago, and thank you for adding that level of consideration, because that takes care of the concerns, I think. And I'm glad the POA also is comfortable with it as well.
And for what it's worth, I'll just point out that I think much of this new language comes pretty much directly from other cities' police misconduct mediation programs. So I think we looked closely at Seattle, New York, New Orleans, Philadelphia. So this is all language that has worked in other places or has been at least agreed to.
So the next step now is for this to go before the POA for a vote, or how does? how do we proceed with this?
The next steps are for the CPOB to vote to recommend to the chief that the chief implement the policy. If the chief chooses to implement the policy, then this will go to city council on consent for the council to approve on consent.
Is that something we can do at this meeting or?
That is something you could do at this meeting, right?
So does everyone feel
Should we
comfortable?
make a motion and have?
That's correct.
Okay.
Motion and if
I move to approve the new mediation policy to be forward to the chief.
Second that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ken,
all right. Second by Walker.
Board Member Wayne, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Walkup, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Tiffany, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Martin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Fonseca, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Dement, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Casares, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Blackman, how do you vote?
yes,
Vice Chair Costanos, how do you vote?
yes.
Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all board members voting yes.
All right. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
There's a long road.
It was a long road.
Long road.
Yeah, thank you.
But, congratulations to everybody who participated, including the POA who hung in there and gave all the time to this group that was needed. I was there along the way as a facilitator only. And both parties are to be commended for hanging in there for that long and getting across the finish line. So thank you. Next time.
I don't know if we have time for those committee reports. Maybe we should hold that. We've got the staff announcements, and I know we have a honored guest that we'd like to hear.
Sure, you can skip over that.
So we'll skip the committee reports for now and go to those staff and board. So,
So
I'm gonna let you take it.
I would like to go ahead and introduce Gracia. Gracia is our new communications manager. I know that we've been in desperate need of a communications manager. We haven't had one for quite some time. So Lynn was doing a fantastic job with communications, but it's.
No, he wasn't. He's being kind. No, he wasn't. Just ask Grace, she was seeing my work.
But Gracia, she comes to us from, well, you can go ahead and talk a little bit about yours.
I was working for Mayor Todd Gloria for the city of San Diego. I was the press secretary and the social media manager, digital media manager there. So I'm happy to bring my expertise on social media matters here, as well as other matters for the city of La Mesa. And I look forward to working with the police department and their PIO to further our messaging via digital platforms.
And also, if you've got, if you're on any of our updates, you would have gotten our this week's city managers update. And if you would have known, it was tweaked and had a little bit of a refresh and facelift, and that was all thanks to Gracia.
And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Next week.
Anyone else with any staff or board announcements?
Can I add one thing real quick that I forgot for the other day? We're working right now on a bias training, implicit bias that we're doing. And then also we're going to be bringing in the department psychologist that does pre-screenings for all officers that are coming in. And that'll probably be in September. Looking to have her come in to give, you mentioned you wanted a presentation on
Yeah.
what that looks like.
Yeah.
So I talked to Dr. Sani and she's all on board. So we'll look September timeframe to get that done.
Awesome.
And I just want to ask everybody on the CPOB to pay attention to what's happening at city council level. There's been discussions about a possible gun safety ordinance, and be good for you to kind of familiarize yourself with what's being brought forward. And we might, if city council is interested in having us weigh in, we might want to discuss that here. So just an FYI to keep your eyes open on city council agendas.
And I just wanted to thank everyone who was either volunteered or attended the Juneteenth. A lot of people in this room were there as volunteers, attendees, and helped make it a successful second year and start building for the third year. So thank you to everyone that was involved and attended and volunteered.
And I have to say, the chief, the two captains, a lot of officers were participating the whole day, and everybody was just commenting like, wow, it's just so nice to have them in the mix and supportive. So anyway, thank you to all of you for all you did that day. That was really impressive.
I just want to commend the chief and his team on the rest of it. They had the other day on the homicide. That was really quick, and that was it's a good feeling. Make sure not that it's
Impressive. Yeah. Very quick. Good job.
Yeah.
Great work, I mean, countywide. Because, you know, working with MTS and working with San Diego PD and all of our partners, we couldn't have wrapped that up that quick without everybody. And, you know, for those that don't know, MTS has amazing camera systems on their platforms.
Yeah.
So that's a huge help to us.
Well, as a city that does not see homicides very often,
Yeah.
it makes it even more impressive how quickly it was taken care of.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any announcements? Not, we'll adjourn at 5:16.
Thank you.
I will see you all in 2024. Just a reminder, I will be
Oh,
out for a while, so
Congratulations.
thank you. So you'll have Dale next month and for next
Yeah.
month.
Good luck to you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Caroline.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
All right.